President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong Un are holding the first talks in their second summit right now. The two men are about to meet for the first time since they arrived in Hanoi, Vietnam. They will speak one-on-one. There they are, greeting the President and Kim Jong Un before North Korean flags and the American flag. After this greeting, they will then have dinner together with their top advisors. They will have more serious talks about nuclear weapons and other issues tomorrow morning, local time. Our senior foreign affairs correspondent and Face the Nation moderator, Margaret Brennan, is in Hanoi. Let's listen in first to the president.
Have you walked back at all on denuclearization in North Korea? No. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Brandon, the senior foreign affairs correspondent and Face the Nation moderator, is in Hanoi. Margaret, good morning. I don't know if you could hear. It sounded like there was a question about walking back the U.S. position. I don't know if you could hear what the president said. Good morning, Margaret.
Good morning to you, John, from Hanoi here. We are just a short distance from that hotel, the Metropole Hotel, where the two leaders are meeting right now. What you heard there were some questions from reporters who are in the room for that historic handshake. And it is historic that this meeting is happening at all. What you heard being asked was, walking back the U.S. position, have you agreed to denuclearization and what that actually means? And the short answer to that question is no. This is simply tonight a meeting to set the tone for negotiations that will get underway tomorrow. And that very basic question of what denuclearizing North Korea would look like, how it would be carried out, all of those details are still up for negotiation, John. And it is extraordinary to see these two men shake hands as they just did, because in many ways what President Trump is giving Kim Jong Un what he wants the most, which is a position on the global stage, looking at him, even referring to him as a friend today, a man who is not only the head of a rogue nuclear state, but one that is a massive human rights abuser. I want to bring into the conversation Major Garrett, our chief White House correspondent, who has traveled in on Air Force One with President Trump just yesterday. And Major, I know this has been a scramble in these past few weeks by State Department officials to try to come up with some kind of agenda. Right. And it's really been up to the last minute. They are not clear on what the president will agree to.
Yeah, there's a bit of improvisational quality to all this. Not rushed together, but there has been less preparation publicly. Now, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but less preparation publicly. Just for example, when we were in Singapore, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, gave a press conference to sort of tee up the first summit, the very, very, very historic summit in Singapore. Nothing like that. It's been very difficult to get any access to U.S. officials. And there was a reference to this dinner tonight. It's described as a social dinner. It doesn't feel to me like a social dinner at all. It feels to me like a place where very serious preparatory conversations are going to go on. The President, Chairman Kim, two top advisors to Chairman Kim, the White House Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, and the Secretary of State. Notably absent, the National Security Advisor. And that begins to suggest, if not some difficulty between the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State, but certainly an effort by the Chief of Staff, the Acting Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, to put himself front and center in the core of these negotiations in what's probably going to be an hour and a half long dinner tonight.
And we know that the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has been the lead in these talks. This is his show. But as you rightly point out, there's a noticeable absence from this dinner. The National Security Advisor has publicly staked out some pretty hard positions for the U.S. and has differed from the Secretary of State's negotiating team at times about how to carry out this. He is not in that room. Exactly.
And Mick Mulvaney, the Acting Chief of Staff, brought two senior aides with him. I'm told that he spent the entire week before coming to Hanoi prepping for this encounter. So he's been focusing as Acting Chief of Staff on this summit and what to get out of it. And as you implied early on, we still don't have, meaning the two countries, a shared definition of denuclearization or peace. Here the two leaders are sitting down, and as you mentioned, Margaret, all of these photos and video around the world convey one thing. If not moral equivalency, at least an equality of representation of the United States and North Korea. Something literally inconceivable before the Trump era began.
And critics of this administration would argue not only is it a reward, but it's something that undoes one of the biggest pressure points the United States has. Kim Jong Un does not look isolated right now. He does not look rogue. He is sitting next to President Trump as almost an equal. John?
Margaret, let me ask both you and Major. We know that denuclearization is the big prize, so to speak, in any kind of ultimate negotiations. What, though, is kind of the first baby step? After the first meeting in Singapore, experts on North Korea said the real thing to look for is a full list of what North Korea says it has, where it had them, so that list can be verified. Is that the thing to look for here as a quote-unquote deliverable from this meeting, short of complete denuclearization?
John, you put your finger on one of the bigger, thornier issues right now. The National Security Advisor, John Bolton, has publicly said time and again that inventory needs to be handed over. It needs to be handed over quickly towards the beginning of these talks. How can we talk about getting rid of something you won't admit you have? And can you match that against what U.S. intelligence knows the North Koreans have? That list has not been handed over. There is pressure on North Korea to do that. But the envoy who's been leading these talks in the weeks up to this point, Steve Biegun, he's new to this. He wasn't there in Singapore. He has indicated that that doesn't have to be necessarily a first step. Yes, the U.S. wants it, but it doesn't have to be handed over right away. That is one of the points of difference, just one, between the National Security Advisor and the State Department. So it is not clear yet if we can expect out of this summit to get that inventory. I spoke to some State Department officials who would indeed still like to see it, but what they've said is they've presented a number of options to the president in terms of things he could offer North Korea. North Korea thinks they've given up more than they've gotten. And I'm told now the president's speaking, so let's try to hear what he's saying.
And it's great to be with you. We had a very successful first summit. I felt it was very successful. And some people would like to see it go quicker. I'm satisfied, you're satisfied. We want to be happy with what we're doing. But I thought the first summit was a great success, and I think this one hopefully will be equal or greater than the first. And we made a lot of progress, and I think the biggest progress was our relationship is really a good one.
대단히 감사합니다. 김정은 위원장이 다시 만나게 되어서 영광입니다. 그리고 또 오늘 같이 하게 되어서 또 매우 기쁩니다. 우리가 베트남에서 만났습니다. 베트남이 아주 우리를 굉장히 환영을 하고 레드카펫을 깐 것처럼 그렇게 환영하고 있습니다. 우리는 첫 번째 그 정상회담을 굉장히 성공적으로 마쳤습니다. 어떤 사람들은 우리의 어떤 진전이 더 빨리 갔으면 하고 그렇게 원하는 사람도 있지만 내가 보기에는 우리가 상당히 잘하고 있고 또 첫 번째 그 정상회담이 굉장히 성공적이었습니다. 이번 회담도 첫 번째 것과 같은 성공 또는 아니면 더 성공하기를 바라고 있습니다. 그리고 우리는 아마 이번에 더 많은 진전을 이룰 것 같습니다.
And as I've said many times, and I say it to the press, I say it to anybody that wants to listen, I think that your country has tremendous economic potential, unbelievable, unlimited. And I think that you will have a tremendous future with your country, a great leader. And I look forward to watching it happen and helping it to happen. And we will help it to happen.
우리 그 여러 번 제가 얘기를 했고 또 언론들한테도 제가 여러 번 했습니다만 저는 우선이 엄청난 경제적인 장점이라고 그렇게 생각합니다. 그리고 앞으로 큰 성공을 이룰 거로 생각합니다. 위대한 지도자 밑에서 아주 잘할 거로 생각합니다. 그리고 앞으로 그러한 성공을 저는 계속 보게 되기를 기대하고 있습니다.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. And we're going to go have dinner. And then we have some big meetings scheduled for tomorrow. And we'll see you, I guess, at a news conference at some point during the day. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, National Level Poland, his testimony.
And there we see the president talking again. Let me ask you, Major Garrett, about the president has stressed repeatedly that North Korea can become a great economic power. When we think of carrots and sticks, this is a carrot. In other words, if you do what we want, we will usher you into the great bounty of the global trade. Is that what the president's up to?
That's one of the things the president has emphasized. It's one of the reasons we're here in Hanoi. The president wants Kim Jong Un to look at Hanoi and all of Vietnam and say, you see, this was a country which the United States was at war with for a prolonged period of time, isolated, but then it began to trade with the West, and over time grew its economy. 35th largest economy according to GDP numbers in the world. North Korea, by contrast, 117th. Now, this idea that economic bounty will come and flow to North Korea if it gives up its nuclear weapons is somewhat intriguing to the North, but there is a process that goes much before that. And it's interesting to see in the sympathetic North Korean and state-controlled press leading up to this summit, they have emphasized that the Americans have to abandon this idea of denuclearization before any reduction in economic sanctions, meaning the United States has to offer something to get something. That is not, Margaret, I think you would agree with me, the American point of view. The American point of view is you're the rogue actor here. You have to start providing specifics about your nuclear program and how it will be inspected and how it will be dismantled before there's any relief of sanctions. And getting over that gap is going to be a huge issue here in Hanoi.
It is, Major, and I think it's worth pointing out that one of the key negotiators who had been in the room in the last round of talks, Andy Kim, who came...
CBS 2 News at 5 and 11. Expect more.
Lift the personal sanctions off those around Kim Jong Un's family. In other words, you can give some type of financial relief, but still keep those really tough sanctions on that you're talking about, the UN sanctions, the things that really put a chokehold around the North Korean economy. And it's an interesting idea, John, as you talk about carrots and sticks, that economic incentive, yes, it's a carrot. It's not clear that Kim Jong Un wants to bite on that one, though, because any time he has allowed in economic investment, it has been in these very walled-off areas within his country, zones that he can still control. So, yes, there's the hope that they have heard expressed by North Korean leaders that they would like to see those sanctions lifted to allow for some economic relief. But the idea that North Korea might want to look like this country, Vietnam, it's not that clear yet that Kim Jong Un wants to go that far because of the risk of giving up some of the control that he might have as a result of sort of letting some capitalism flow.
And it's worth pointing out the reason this second summit is occurring is the same reason the first one occurred. North Korea has to be recognized as some form of nuclear power.
Yes.
That nuclear power reality is what's brought Kim Jong Un to this stage. It is central to his political strength in a dictatorship, but also North Korea's ability to say on the world stage, it matters, something it has craved for literally decades. And giving up that thing which gave it world credibility, well, that is not only unresolved, but unknowable. John?
That's right. Excellent point, both of you. Thank you, Margaret and Major. And there we have it, that extraordinary picture, two men meeting together that some number of years ago it would have seemed unthinkable that an American president would have met with a North Korean leader. So it is historic now. The question is, what will actually come of it? We'll have much more on the summit in Vietnam on CBS This Morning. Coverage will continue throughout the day on your local news, on this CBS station, and on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm John Dickerson, CBS News, New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.